Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, you guys send us so much good stuff.
Yeah.
Like really insightful stuff about AI and where it's all going.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And so what we wanted to do today was really distill, like, what's the most important stuff?
Right.
You know, get people up to speed.
Absolutely.
And so what we're looking at today is the McKinsey Global Survey on AI
That's right.
from March 2025, but the data is from July of 2024.
Yeah.
So it's pretty recent.
Fairly recent. Yeah, that's right.
And it's interesting because it really gives us this picture of how companies are adopting AI in a very real way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just playing around anymore. It's both the analytical side and the generative side.
Right.
Which, you know, just to remind people, generative AI is the kind that creates new content.
Yes.
Like the text and the images and the code.
That's right.
As opposed to just the AI that's been around for a while that analyzes data.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to understand how companies are kind of changing because of AI.
Right.
Where they're seeing the value, if they are seeing the value.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of risks they're facing because of this.
Of course.
And what's happening to talent. Like, are people getting new jobs? Are people losing jobs? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the whole landscape is changing, right?
Yeah, and we're going to find some really interesting stuff in here. Like, there's this surprising thing about how important the CEO is in all this.
Yeah, interesting.
And how the workforce thing is not as straightforward as you might think.
Right. Much more nuanced.
Okay, so let's jump in.
Let's do it.
What's the big picture here?
The big picture is really kind of mind-blowing when you look at the speed of adoption.
Yeah.
Like in July 2024, we had 78% of organizations saying they're using AI in at least one function.
Wow. So like most companies?
Pretty much, yeah. And to put that into perspective, just a year before in 2023, that number was only 55%.
So that's a huge jump.
It is a massive increase, yeah. And then, of course, you've got the generative AI piece,
Right.
which is growing even faster.
Okay, how much faster?
So in July 2024,
Yeah.
71% of organizations said they were using it regularly in at least one function.
Wow.
And that was up from 65% just at the beginning of 2024.
Okay, so it was already pretty high and it jumped even more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is that companies aren't just dipping their toes in anymore.
Right.
They're really going all in.
And it's not just like one team in the company doing it either.
Exactly. It's spreading.
Right.
On average, companies are now using AI in about 3 different business functions.
Oh, wow. Okay, so across the company.
Across the board, yeah. Not just isolated pockets.
So we see AI's up, it's everywhere. But the big question I think everyone wants to know is, are they actually getting value from it?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And the answer is it's complicated.
Okay.
But what's becoming clear is that just throwing AI at a problem isn't enough.
You can't just plug it in and expect magic.
You can't. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Companies are realizing that they need to actually change how they work.
Okay, so like fundamental changes.
Fundamental changes, yeah.
Hmm.
Especially if they want to get the real benefits of generative AI.
Interesting.
And the bigger companies, those with over 500 million in revenue, they seem to be moving faster on this.
So what are the big things that companies need to do to actually get a return on this AI investment?
Well, the research highlights a couple of key things.
Okay.
One is the CEO, surprisingly.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it turns out having a CEO who's actively involved in AI governance.
So for our listeners, AI governance is basically the rules of the road for AI.
Right, the policies, the processes, the ethical considerations, all of that.
Right.
Having that oversight from the top, it's really linked to higher profits.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's not just a tech thing. It's a leadership thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially for the larger companies.
And what were those numbers again?
So 28% of all AI-using companies said their CEO was overseeing AI governance.
Okay.
But in larger companies, when asked about board responsibility, that number dropped to just 17%.
So it seems like it really matters who's driving this.
Absolutely.
And often it's not just one person either.
Right. On average, it's 2 leaders who share that AI governance responsibility.
It's a kind of a team effort.
Yeah, shared ownership.
Yeah.
And what McKinsey really emphasizes here is that having that leadership buy-in, that clear direction from the top, it's essential.
Makes sense.
Because it's not just about implementing a new technology.
Right.
It's about this huge organizational shift.
Yeah, a whole new way of working.
Exactly. And that requires leadership to manage that change and to make sure the resources are there.
Okay, so CEO buy-in, that's one.
Yeah.
What's the other big factor?
The other one, and this is arguably the most important, is workflow redesign.
Ah, okay, so not just plugging AI into the same old processes.
Right. You got to rethink how work actually gets done.
From the ground up.
From the ground up. And this is the thing that has the biggest impact on profits, especially when it comes to generative AI.
Interesting.
But here's the catch. Only 21% of companies using generative AI are actually doing this.
Oh, wow. So most companies are missing out.
Yeah, it
Huh.
seems like it. So why do you think that is? Why aren't more companies redesigning their workflows?
I mean, it seems like a big undertaking, right?
It is. It takes time and resources and a willingness to completely change how things are done.
Plus, maybe some companies just don't fully grasp the potential benefits.
Yeah, or they're hesitant to disrupt their existing operations.
So it seems like there's still a lot of education that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
Now, what about centralization? How are companies organizing all this AI stuff?
It's interesting, they're taking a very targeted approach
Okay.
for things like risk and compliance
Hmm.
and data governance. Those are usually fully centralized.
So like a center of excellence type of thing?
Exactly, a central hub for
Yeah.
expertise and oversight.
That makes sense. You want consistency for those areas.
Right, you need clear standards, especially
Yeah.
for sensitive stuff.
Mhm.
But for other things like talent acquisition and adoption of AI solutions,
Yeah.
a hybrid model is more common.
Okay, so a mix of central and distributed.
Yeah, exactly. Smaller companies, though, they tend to centralize everything,
Why do you think that is?
maybe because they have fewer resources
Right.
or a simpler structure.
So it really depends on the company.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the good stuff now. Let's talk about the risks.
Right. The flip side,
What are companies worried about?
well, the survey shows that there's a growing awareness of the risks,
Okay, good.
and they're putting more effort into mitigating them.
That's good to hear.
The big ones that keep coming up are accuracy of AI outputs,
Yeah, that makes sense.
cybersecurity,
Of course.
and intellectual property infringement.
So those are also the ones that have actually caused problems.
Yeah, they're the ones that have actually led to negative consequences.
Makes sense.
And interestingly, these aren't just concerns for small companies.
Right.
Larger organizations are facing these same challenges.
So it doesn't matter how big you are.
Nope, everyone's grappling with this. Although larger companies do seem to be tackling a wider range of risks overall,
Okay.
especially when it comes to cybersecurity and privacy.
Makes
But they're not necessarily better at managing accuracy or explainability of AI outputs.
So there are some universal challenges.
It seems so. And it's not just hypothetical risks either.
Right.
A pretty significant number of companies have already experienced negative consequences,
Okay, how many?
about 47%.
Oh, wow. That's almost half.
And that's actually similar to what we saw in early 2024.
So it's not getting any better.
Not really, no.
So what are companies doing to make sure the AI is actually doing what it's supposed to?
Well, there's a lot of variation in how they're monitoring the outputs.
Okay.
Some companies, 27% to be exact.
Yeah.
They review every single thing the AI produces before using it.
Wow, that's thorough.
Yeah, very hands-on approach. But on the other hand, you have a similar number of companies
Okay.
who are only reviewing 20% or less of the AI's work.
Oh, wow. So a lot less oversight.
Yeah, a lot more trust in the AI. And then there are companies somewhere in between.
So it's all over the place.
It is a real mix. But interestingly, companies in certain sectors like business, legal, and professional services,
Yeah.
they're much more likely to review everything.
That makes sense. The stakes are higher.
Right, a lot more on the line. So there's definitely no one-size-fits-all approach to risk management.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about best practices.
Yeah, the stuff that actually works.
Because it's clear that just adopting AI isn't enough.
Right. You got to do it right.
So what does the research say about what companies should be doing?
Well, it turns out that most companies haven't really seen a huge impact on their bottom line yet.
Even with all this AI adoption.
Even with all the AI, yeah. And a big reason for that is they're not really implementing the best practices.
There's a lot of talk, but not enough action.
Pretty much, yeah. In fact, there was another survey, specifically in developed markets,
Okay.
and only 1% of executives said their generative AI efforts were mature.
So basically nobody.
Basically nobody, yeah. So we're still very much in the early stages here.
But McKinsey did identify 12 specific practices for adoption and scaling.
Right.
So what are the ones that really matter?
The one that stands out is tracking KPIs.
Okay, so actually measuring what the AI is doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got to have those metrics. And for larger companies, having a clear roadmap is also super important.
Yeah, so everyone knows what's happening.
Right. Everyone's on the same page.
Hmm.
But here's the thing. Less than a third of the survey respondents said their companies were doing most of these practices.
So there's a big gap between knowing and doing.
Big gap, yeah. But again, larger companies seem to be doing better.
Okay.
They're more likely to have dedicated AI teams.
Mm-hmm.
They communicate more about AI internally.
Mm-hmm.
Their leaders are more engaged. They provide training.
Yeah.
They embed AI solutions into their workflows.
They actually use it.
They actually use it, yeah.
They have those roadmaps and feedback loops,
Right.
and they focus on building trust with employees and customers. So they're doing it right.
They're doing it right, yeah.
Yeah.
They also tell stories about the changes AI is bringing. They track those KPIs
Right.
and even use incentives to encourage adoption.
So it's a whole package.
It's a whole culture shift. And bigger companies, they just have more resources to do all that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about talent? What's happening to jobs?
Well, hiring for AI roles is pretty much steady compared to last year,
Okay.
but there are some interesting shifts happening.
Like what?
For example, there's less demand for data visualization and design specialists.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Maybe because some of those tasks are being automated now.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
But on the other hand, there are new roles emerging,
Okay, what kind of roles?
like AI compliance specialists.
So the risk management people.
Exactly. And AI ethics specialists.
So making sure the AI is doing the right thing.
Right, the ethical considerations.
Eli.
And as you might expect, larger companies are hiring for a wider range of AI roles,
Yeah.
especially those core technical roles like data scientists, machine learning engineers, data engineers.
So it's still hard to find those people.
Well, it's interesting because while it's still a challenge,
Yeah.
fewer companies are reporting difficulty hiring compared to previous years.
Oh, so maybe the talent pool is growing?
Maybe, yeah. Or maybe companies are getting better at finding the right people.
Right.
But one thing's for sure, AI data scientists are still in super high demand.
They're the rock stars.
Yeah, they're the ones everyone wants. Half of the companies surveyed said they need to hire more data scientists.
Okay, so the hiring frenzy isn't over.
Not for data scientists, no.
Mm.
And what's really interesting is that a lot of companies are focusing on reskilling.
Okay, so training their existing employees.
Exactly. A lot of them have already done this in the past year.
Because of AI.
Yeah, because they need people who can work with AI.
Right. Yeah.
And they expect to do even more reskilling in the next 3 years.
So it's not just about bringing in new people.
Right. It's about upgrading the skills of the people you already have.
So what happens to the people whose jobs are automated by AI? Are they all out of work?
Well, it's not that simple.
Okay.
Most companies are actually using the time saved by AI to have their employees do new things.
Yeah, okay.
Or to focus more on their existing tasks.
So more value-added work.
Exactly. But larger companies, they are more likely to report headcount reductions.
Okay, so some jobs are being lost.
Yeah. And interestingly, those headcount reductions are correlated with higher profits.
So it's kind of a trade-off.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
But overall, 38% of respondents said they don't expect AI to have much impact on their workforce size in the next 3 years.
Okay, so no huge changes.
Not for most companies, no.
Yeah.
Financial services, though, they're an exception.
They're expecting more job losses.
Yeah, more reductions. And it's interesting because C-level execs, they're actually not that different from other managers.
In terms of their expectations.
Yeah, they have similar views,
Mhm.
although they are slightly more optimistic about overall headcount increases
Okay.
when you consider all types of AI, not just generative AI.
So maybe they see the bigger picture.
Yeah, maybe. And it's not just about overall numbers either.
Right.
Different functions within companies are going to be impacted differently.
So some areas will shrink, some will grow.
Exactly.
Mm.
Service operations and supply chain management,
Yeah.
those are expected to see job losses.
Because a lot of those tasks can be automated.
Right. But IT and product development,
Yeah.
those are expected to grow.
Because you need people to build and manage the AI.
Exactly.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Some jobs will be lost, but new ones will be created.
Okay, so where are companies actually using generative AI the most?
The top areas are marketing and sales, product and service development,
Mm-hmm.
service operations, software engineering, and IT.
So those are all functions where AI can really make a difference.
Yeah, those are the areas with the most potential for efficiency, innovation, and value creation.
Mhm.
And marketing and sales, that seems to be common across all industries.
Okay.
But the other uses, they vary quite a bit depending on the sector.
So it's not one size fits all?
Not at all. Like in media and telecom, they're really focused on using it in service operations.
Okay.
Tech companies are using it heavily in software engineering. In professional services, they're using it a lot in knowledge management.
So they're each finding their own sweet spot.
Exactly. And of course, larger companies, they tend to use it more broadly across the board,
Right.
just because they have more resources and more use cases.
So what about the content itself? What are companies generating with AI?
Text is still the most common, by far.
Yeah.
63% of companies are using it for that.
So like writing articles and emails and stuff?
Yeah, all sorts of text-based content.
Yeah.
But they're also branching out into other areas.
Like what?
Over a third of respondents are using it to create images.
Oh, wow.
And over a quarter are using it for code generation.
So not just text anymore.
Nope. They're getting creative. Tech companies, they have the widest range of outputs.
They're really experimenting.
Yeah, they're pushing the boundaries.
Hmm.
While advanced industries, they're using more images and audio.
So it's really evolving.
Absolutely.
So we see all these use cases, we see the impact on jobs, but what about the bottom line? Are companies actually making more money because of AI?
Well, the good news is that more and more companies are reporting revenue increases
Okay, that's good.
within the business units that are using AI,
Okay.
both generative AI and traditional analytical AI.
So it's working at the department level.
Yeah, it's showing promise. And even better, a majority of companies are now reporting cost reductions
Wow. Okay.
from generative AI in most business functions.
So it's saving them money too.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Especially in HR, that's where half the companies reported cost savings.
So it's really starting to pay off.
It is, yeah. But here's the catch.
Uh-oh.
All those positive results at the department level,
Yeah.
they haven't really translated into a big impact on the company's overall profits yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over 80% of companies say there's been no tangible impact on their EBIT.
So it's not hitting the bottom line.
Not yet, no. Only 17% of companies say that 5% or more of their EBIT is attributable to generative AI.
So there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, it's early days. This just reinforces what we talked about earlier.
About the need for big changes.
Yeah, you need that strategic vision, those organizational changes.
Otherwise, you're just getting small wins here and there.
Exactly. It's not enough to move the needle.
Mhm.
But it's not just companies using AI either.
Right.
Individuals are using it too.
Okay.
And the use of personal generative AI for work is actually skyrocketing.
So people are taking matters into their own hands.
Yeah, they're finding ways to use it to be more productive. And the leaders are actually leading the way here.
Okay.
53% of C-level execs say they use generative AI regularly for work.
So they're not just telling other people to use it.
Right, they're using it themselves. And this trend is happening across industries and regions.
So it's really catching on.
Absolutely.
So what's the big takeaway here? What should people be thinking about?
The key takeaway is that AI adoption is booming.
Yeah.
But just having the technology isn't enough.
Right.
You need to make those strategic changes.
Like what we talked about.
Exactly. The CEO needs to be involved.
Yeah.
You need to redesign workflows, manage risks, implement best practices.
It's a whole transformation.
It is a complete transformation. And the impact on jobs is more complex than people might think.
Right.
It's not just about job losses.
It's about reskilling and new opportunities.
Exactly. So as you listen to all this cup, think about your own company.
Yeah.
Think about your industry.
What are the big shifts you need to be aware of? What questions should you be asking?
Because AI is here to stay.
Yeah.
It's not going away.
And the companies that figure out how to use it effectively,
Right.
they're the ones that are going to thrive.
So let's all go out there and thrive.
Let's do it.